deciding which washing machine to use, um, to purchase perhaps depends on the individual and their perception. So if we look at this report by SAMA, which looks at the influence of eco-labeling on consumer behavior. So, some of the washing machines have those stars on them or the water ratings or whatever. Um, what they found here, if you look at some of the survey results, price came out as number one, as the first priority, which is not unsurprising, followed by equipment, so the actual machine itself, the features of it or the look of it perhaps, and then energy consumption as a first priority is down to 11%, and only 8%, bit under 8%, said water consumption was a key concern for them. Second priority, price, but energy consumption was significant there. So it's sort of between price and energy seem to be, according to this report, were the two main motivators of consumers. Water was less so. Again, depending on the context in the country you're in, the state you're in. So certainly in Queensland at the moment, as I've mentioned numerous times, there's been an extremely long drought. So that's front and centre in many Queenslanders' minds. And so they might have a slightly different perspective when looking at washing machines and which ones to purchase. Let's go inside the house now and have a look at water usage. And if we look at everything that the water is used for in the house, we'll find that 26% of water is used for the toilet, 16% for shower, leaks is 13%, which is pretty significant, and clothes is 21%. So fully 1/5 of all water used in the average Australian home is to wash clothes. So it's quite a significant amount. And as we said before, water usage correlates with freshwater use in the planetary boundaries, which we said, whilst in the safe zone, um, is problematic because it's the distribution of water around the planet that's the issue. Might be lots of snow in North America, but there's no rain in Queensland. Equally for electricity consumption, which is related to climate change, CO2 emissions, if the electricity is produced from burning coal, then 31% of all the electricity consumed in the average Australian home is to heat up water, um, followed by refrigeration and heating in general of the home. So this is the big one. So one of the easiest way that you can tackle this issue is to wash in cold water. But again, it goes back to that sort of cultural thing of a lot of people still think that hot water is going to clean clothes much better than cold water. Also, if you use detergent that's specific for cold water, it tends to be more expensive than the other ones. So that's another factor that plays into it that we need to consider if we want to change consumers' perceptions. At this stage, I just want to introduce you to phosphorus in detergent, or the story of phosphorus in detergent. So phosphorus was one of the elements that helps break down dirt and disentangle it from it. And if we look at a list of all different brands of detergents available and we look at the composition of sodium, which is basically salt, which is the other ingredient in detergent, and phosphorus, you'll notice that they're different levels, different mixes and compositions of each. The point being, not all detergents are the same. It's a product that we kind of don't think much about. It's a product we just sort of buy almost generically. We might buy the same brand as our parents bought or that we grew up with, and then we stick to it. But once again, there's an opportunity here for a brand to associate themselves with certain detergents. And given that the chemical composition of detergents is quite different, then the way they perform with your garment might be quite different. So it kind of, it's surprising to me that there hasn't been that correlation between the two. Uh, what happened with, so basically, sorry, if I go back one step, phosphorus or phosphates are not good for the environment. They actually bleed into the nitrogen and phosphorus flows in the planetary boundaries. So what started to occur, I don't know if I've got a video here of it, no, I haven't, is people would wash their clothes, the grey water would go out into um, into the ecosystem and would often contaminate freshwater supplies or river systems out there. So in 2014, 2011, a campaign started to remove phosphates from laundry detergent. And by 2014, all Australian companies had voluntarily agreed to remove this environmentally damaging element from their detergent. So it was a good example of companies not needing um, motivation from governments or laws from governments to change their detergents. They did it voluntarily. Uh, they were pragmatic about it. They did it because there was a strong campaign in the United States to remove it, and so they didn't want to be seen as the only brand that wasn't eco-friendly, if you like. But once again, once we see brands like this, detergent brands that are going phosphorus free, should we associate with them, or should our brand endorse those ones? At this stage, I want to introduce you to Tulia Jack, who was a past student of this program, and she did, after she completed uh, our program, she went on and did the degree, and then after that went to Melbourne University and did a master's by research into people's attitudes towards clean clothes. And quite an interesting topic. What she did, she got a group of people to wear a pair of jeans for 6 months without washing them. I think it was 6 months. Um, and she asked, and so every week, and she asked the people wearing the jeans that at every opportunity, when they were talking to their friends or other people, they would mention that they hadn't washed their jeans in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, whatever the case may be. And Tulia would then record people's reactions to this idea of people wearing dirty clothes, and did her whole thesis on that basis. The point being, when and how often we wash our clothes is driven not by scientific evidence, but by cultural norms. It's just, you probably don't think about it very often. You probably wear an article once and then chuck it in the wash basket. You might wear some articles twice and then put it in the wash basket. It all depends on your upbringing and your surrounds as to how you do that. So given that, um, the way we wash clothes is behavioural, it means it can be changed. Through education, we can change people's behaviours. She's now gone on to do a PhD in washing clothes and attitudes towards washing clothes in Sweden at the moment. I think she might have finished it by now, I'm not sure. But interesting example or of a pathway if you're interested in doing research into sustainability at some level. I'll just show you this Levi's clip. I think I've got it up here. Yeah. As well, remembering I was talking about care labels before, and the standard care label has been around for X amount of years. It's a legal requirement, um, but Levi's has sort of taken it further, or has evolved the care label into being not just caring for the garment itself, but also caring for the planet. So if you look at this one, they're encouraging you to wash in cold water, to line dry, and donate to Goodwill. And if I go down a bit further in this one, you'll see here that this is Levi's sort of telling customers that they should dry their clothes on a clothesline, spot clean, rather than, wash the whole pair of jeans. Soak them well before you wash them, machine wash, don't tumble dry, etc. So this is sort of evidence of, and it goes into a lot more information about using less water as well that you can look at in your own time. But this is the evidence I was talking about at the start of the video, where you're starting to see companies cross that boundary of point of sale and get involved in a customer and how they look after their clothes, particularly how they wash their clothes. It's certainly a growing area, I think, and one that we should be considerate of. Okay, so summing up this part, um, energy. So we run a washing machine, we need electricity, that impacts climate change. We need water to wash our clothes, it impacts on fresh water use, and we need chemicals, detergents to wash them. And depending on the composition of those detergents, it can impact on the biogeochemical flows. So that's what I was saying before, that this sort of ticks a lot of boxes, the washing of clothes, in terms of using the Earth's resources. Lots of scope to change it. The next stage then, after we've washed the clothes, is to dry them, and this is pretty straightforward. There's two options you've got. You can line dry or stick it in a dryer. If we look at the electricity consumption for a household using clothes, you'll see that in the whole process of washing and drying, that 13% of the energy is consumed by heating water, 6% to run the washing machine, 81% to dry it. So the big evil in the whole process is tumble dryers. They use an enormous amount of electricity and they're very inefficient because basically you're creating a micro environment inside the machine that's just hot to dry them, and that means you've got to evaporate a lot of moisture out of the garment. If we look at line dried and CO2 emissions, you'll see that if you hang them out to dry, then CO2 emissions are quite low. However, as soon as you introduce the machine, and as I said, the increased electricity, then CO2 emissions rise rapidly. So the most effective way to get consumers to release less CO2 emissions is to simply tell them not to use a tumble dryer. Easy to say, not easy to do. A couple of reasons for this is, one, houses in Australia anyway are getting bigger and the backyards are getting smaller, so there's less space to have a clothesline. I mean, Australia was in the 50s and 60s was ubiquitous in that you had clotheslines everywhere. Now, that's becoming, firstly, they're ugly, or they're deemed to be ugly, so people don't want them in the backyards. And as I said, the backyards are getting much more smaller, much more emphasis on the design or the landscaping of the backyard as well. Secondly, gender equality. So in the past, in 1950s, 60s, it was the women that washed clothes. And so they were given the task of washing and drying and all day to do it. With gender equality now and equal number of men and women working, the time to wash clothes has been reduced, or time allocated has been reduced, and also women are basically saying, well, you know, I'm not going to spend all day washing and drying clothes. It should be done by both of us in equal. Dual income, as I said, means they've got less time, busy lives, and also in Australia, more and more people are living in apartments which lend themselves to tumble drying. So that's just sort of some of the social changes occurring in a society which change the way we wash and dry clothes. If we look at this chart, I thought I'd just throw this in to look at the trend in apartments. These are attached dwellings, which basically mean apartments. So we look at Melbourne, which is this one here. So in 2002, roughly 30% of all new dwellings or approval to build houses were apartments. And we've seen since 2009 quite a rapid increase, up to more than 50% now of new homes being built that are apartments. So the trend in Australian cities, or certainly in Melbourne anyway, not so much in Perth, is that more and more Australians are living in apartments, therefore probably considering the purchase of a dryer. In China, exactly the same things occurring. If we recall, this is residential floor space being constructed. In rural China, that's declined. because less and less people are wanting to live in country towns. In China, more and more are shifting towards the cities, and so, and quite dramatically, more and more are shifting towards the cities. And as such, you're getting these sorts of developments occurring there, which doesn't allow for much space for line drying. And as I said, that correlates to our economic development model. So as our economy changes, our society changes. As our society changes, our habits as to how we wash and dry clothes also change. We need to keep up. If we look at an interesting campaign from a few years ago in the United States, Drying for Freedom, I'll just show you the clip of this one.
So can we talk about clotheslines?
Clotheslines. The infamous clothesline question.
Yeah.
We developed this kooky American aesthetic that says clotheslines are ugly. There are 60 million Americans who live in community associations that don't allow people to hang out their clothes.
Rules prohibit me from hanging my laundry outside.
One lady that lives here had a drying rack, and she was reported and she had to remove it.
There was an argument. A life was lost because of clothes hanging outside.
For General Electric, here is Ronald Reagan. Good evening.
General Electric used the Reagan family to market this idea of total electric living.
You know, to live better, you've got to
live better electrically.
We were led to expect that we'd be happier, that you must have certain things to be self-satisfied.
Well, the United States uses 25% of the world's energy, and we have 4% of the world's population.
If the lower-income people around the globe follow our bad example, the whole planet is driven towards disaster.
There was a hand dryer, now it is electric dryer.
We have to ensure that our appliances reach every nook and corner of the country.
To dry your clothes, so many kilograms of coal are being burnt.
It's a symbol of wise energy use.
They'll just have to pry the clothespins out of my cold, dead hands.
So this is a tool of freedom, and I'm not going to let it go.
It feels good in that way.
So it's just an example of it's a good film to watch that sort of encompasses how small changes can have pretty dramatic effects on the environment. So as he mentioned there, the United States constitutes 4% of the world's population, yet consumes 25% of the world's resources. And so if we look at the American way of living, or the Western way of living, back to my initial proposition from week one, it's just simply unsustainable. The whole world cannot live that way without there being some pretty significant changes to energy usage or energy production. And something as simple as washing clothes and drying clothes can have quite a dramatic impact. So these are sort of sleeper issues that may or may not come to life or come to fore in the next few years. But as a brand, we sort of at least need to be aware of them, if not ready to respond to any campaigns like this, which may gain traction in the community. Excuse me. The other way to go, which hasn't been that successful, has been smart fabrics. So nanotechnology that allows the fabric to absorb odor, reducing the number of washes required. You might have done this in materials, so the use of silver is one way which absorbs odors. There's other fabrics now which are also on the market to do so. The only problem with these, I don't know where if I got it, no, I haven't got it there, is the nanotechnology, like we looked at with sunblock last week, it was last week, 2 weeks ago, falls into the category of novel entities. We don't know what impact that these human-made or human-manipulated fibers will have on ecosystems once they're released into those systems. And also the other thing, selling a garment on the fact that it doesn't need to be washed often. might be scientifically sound, but then our emotional instincts kick in, which say, well, we wash clothes at the end of the week or every day, whatever the case may be. So we sort of negate the science and fall back on our behavioral attitudes towards clothing. So it's there, it's in the market, but really hasn't kind of gotten anywhere. Okay, the final stages with press. There's not much to talk about here. The press is an iron and basically uses electricity to do so, and we're back to climate change as the key contributor. Okay, washing conventions then. So we can say it's labor intensive. Sorry, when it was labor intensive, i.e. you had to wash by hand, then you would think twice before you washed the garments because it was a lot of hard work, and so you tended to be more efficient. You'd wear the clothes until they seriously got dirty. Once washing machines came on the scene in the 1950s, our behaviours started to change and we started to wash on a regular basis. So maybe Tuesday's our wash day or Sunday or whatever the case might be. And you simply chuck it in there. So it's convenient. So even if the clothes aren't dirty, and often the clothes are not very dirty, we still run the washing machine, consume water, consume electricity, even though we don't have to. So as a result of this technology, washing is now as much a condition of behavior than it is of hygiene. And as I said before, if it's behavior, then it can be changed through education. I don't know why that one's there. Okay. Sorry. Okay, we've got one more lecture to go, the end of use of the garment, and we're finished for the semester. So once again, you should start to prepare for the final assessment with 45%. And the context is always, how am I going to engage the brand with regards to today? How am I going to engage the brand with the washing and drying of clothes? Okay, if you have a look at the quiz, you'll see there's numerous examples in there as well that are worth looking at, particularly of Levi's and what they've done. Okay, thank you.